right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We are a little bit behind schedule, but we have awesome guests. Leo Zhao has been nice enough to join us from Berlin. He's very busy, but thanks for stopping by, Leo. We weren't able to get your name on the title, but maybe maybe next time, because you definitely draw some eyeballs. Everybody appreciates your work. Ben, of course, from Hungary. Carlo is in DC. And there's so much to discuss. Obviously the biggest story is Canada and that Politico article. Just putting forth the common sense argument that Nazis they're pretty good people, really. Trump did that, and everybody agreed that Nazis are great people, and now Politico is agreeing. It's just weird. I think it's a big sign of the title of our entire podcast is Blowback: Exposing Imperial Decline, and this is what we're seeing. We're seeing the Imperial forces just in decline, and they're struggling to cobble together a narrative and justify all of their crazy stuff they're doing. So having said that, guys, what's our first topic? Do we want to talk about Canada and that the Nazi in Parliament again?
Well, we discussed it, but this Politico article, I'm going to cobble together just two articles. Both were Sunday, big op-eds, op-ed pieces. The first one is this Politico one saying, fighting against the USSR isn't necessary to make you a Nazi. Yes, it fucking did. Yes, it fucking does. And all of these people, what the Canadian Parliament thing did was, honoring an SS Galicia, a veteran, and basically saying, no, that's okay. And at the same day, the retired, the Secretary of Defense of Britain, Ben, I always get them mixed up because Ben Hodges is a NATO arsehole who does the same thing, but this is Ben Wallace, right?
Wallace.
Yeah.
Wallace did another op-ed, and it was basically, it's time to end it. Russia's losing, but the main sentence, the main gist of it was the average age of the Ukrainian soldier is above 40. And you should learn from, 1938, 39 England, and just expand that recruitment. Just get the fucking kids in there, which gives a whole new phrase to the last Ukrainian, because that's when you're winning. Whitewashing Nazis, recruiting everyone. Thoughts?
Yeah, and I'm not sure that kids have been exempt from being recruited. I just assumed they were all dead by now, and that's why the age was up to 40 on the front lines. So I don't think they were trying to not kill young people, but that was awful. I thought maybe Ben Wallace had resigned because he didn't quite like what was going on, but then he comes out with an op-ed like this, and it's like, oh yeah, well, that's not the reason. And then Ben Hodges, he's a U.S. general.
Yes.
He just wants to sell weapons. He's such a.
I'm sorry about all the horrible Bens out there in the world. They really are.
We don't blame you, Ben.
Moon of Alabama essentially said the same thing that Billy Bob was saying, that the young people are already dead or they fled the country.
Oh, most of them have, yeah. The willing, those real Azovites, they've been gone for a better part of a year now. There's people, everybody can watch these videos. This is people you can stuff into the back of a van. Everybody's seen a bunch of these videos that are coming now. And by the way, it's been 3 days since we're in October, Red October, and women age 18 to 60 are eligible for the draft in Ukraine now. That's where we are right now.
Women age 18 to 60.
Yeah, they are.
That's a wide net. Now, was that changed? Do you know what it was changed from?
I'm not sure. I just read the Ukrainska Pravda version of now we should expand it to women, and this was the age group defined as combat ready or serve military aged or something like that.
Does anybody have an explanation for this insanity? Anybody?
Well, we have some comments from people who are insane, if you want to.
Yeah, sure.
Two people. One of the guys who were there in 2014 in the Maidan was Lindsey Graham, obviously, and he outright said it. Now, this is a warning to Taiwan, basically stopping. Oh, by the way, the big event in the US was this 45-day stopgap bill, which keeps the parliament, keeps your government running, but without any aid to Ukraine. And that was a bad, bad sign for Zelensky. And he was in an uproar. There's adverts. And he said, not supporting Ukraine means a death sentence to Taiwan. And then after Canada, Chrystia fucking Friedland, Nazi granddad's granddaughter, sat on a little couch in front of Hillary Clinton, something we can watch or watch part of, and basically discussed, yes, this is all, you're dying to send a signal to China. Do you want to play that clip for everyone? Shall we just experience that?
I agree with you, Madam Secretary, that the single strongest message of deterrent we can send to China is a decisive Ukrainian victory. That is something. That is the message that says to all the world's dictators, you know what? Democracy is prepared to fight back, and democracy can actually win.
Chrystia Freeland, ladies and gentlemen.
And I do have a little.
I really hope the Ukrainians are watching this. They should know what they're dying for.
Well, I'm always coming. I want to support Donald Trump right now. In something.
Hooray! That's new.
General Kelly just came out with these remarks that Trump made, and it's all Kelly's all patriotism, and you got to fight him in Afghanistan, or you're going to end up fighting him here. And Trump was basically calling people who went to these wars, who were lied to essentially, who were such stupid ninnies that they went and they gave their lives and their limbs to. He's calling them stupid ninnies, basically, not as directly as I'm doing it now, but he's suggesting what was in it for them. Nothing was in it for them. Whether they believed the lies or didn't believe the lies or whatever the circumstances were. So, in a certain sense, Trump, and he's making perfect foreign policy sense. You don't, if you're being lied to, you should be smart enough to know that there's a fucking liar out there, and you should go after the liar, not the people that they want to send you to die in front of. You should address the lying, and the fact that there's this dichotomy between people who claim they know the truth, like I'm always saying, the 12% that. Only 12% of the U.S. population believes the media, yet 85% of them will act in favor of some U.S. policy initiative that's just based on out and out lying, and how that's got to end in Ukraine. It's extreme. It's I don't understand how they can send so many people to die while basically being hustled by some of the biggest criminals on the planet.
Right. So I'm not quite sure. So General Kelly, he was in the Trump government, right? He was
national security. It was not. No, he was chief of staff. Okay.
Yeah, something
under
like
Trump.
that.
Yeah.
He was. Yeah. So he recently came out with some quotes from he's like telling everybody, later on what Trump had said to him, and Trump had some not kind words for the people that agreed to join the U.S. military and serve. Is that what the point of General Kelly was?
He confirmed statements. I don't know if it was before, an official committee or one of these Trump trials, but he said, yes, Trump made these statements.
Okay.
He called McCain a loser, and that sort of thing. McCain was shot down 5 fucking times. I got to agree with Trump. That's my definition of a loser, a lousy pilot.
Yeah.
Also, great dual use of the term Trump trials. It makes sense in the current.
It does.
Yeah.
I know Christian Parenti wrote a great article about Trump and why they didn't like him. And he had a lot of great quotes from the people that hated Trump about how Trump would sit down with the generals and just call them names, tell them they're losers, things like that probably didn't go over too well. But I would recommend that article by Christian Parenti on Trump. Michael's son, the great Michael Parenti's son.
Yeah.
So what about what Christia said? Christia Freeland. So she wants to present this to the Western public like it's dictatorships versus democracy. And
Yeah.
for democracy to do really good and to overcome the challenges posed by the evil dictatorships, we really, really, really need to win in Ukraine. Ukraine is very important. Um, can we unpack, this idea that the West is a democracy and China and Russia are dictatorships? Like, can we just knock that down a little bit?
I can wrap that up, but I really want to hear first from Leo because upon the charges of
Leo's working. Leo is busy. He's working.
I'm sorry.
No.
I'm fully paying attention. You have my undivided attention. I'm just doing some menial.
Then before anything else,
letting
explain to us the caption of your amazing sweatshirt. Explain.
The caption doesn't say anything. It's just it was a collaboration between the Russian
Nahtsees. It says Russian on the bottom.
Rubchinsky, yeah.
Rubchinsky.
Who was pretty famous Russian fashion designer, and he made this, I think, in 2000. I don't remember, 2006, 2010.
Wow.
Or maybe a little bit later than that. But the first time I saw it was on ASAP Rocky. He was on stage rocking one of these, and I said, I want one of those shirts. And I managed to get one. Yeah.
He was really ahead of his time if he came out with that in, 2005.
Well, these people, maybe he had some thought behind it, but let's not read too much into the intentions of these fashion designers. They're opportunists, and maybe at that time he thought it was cool. And I mean, the world was a very hopeful place back in the up until just 2 years ago, or a lot more. It seems kind of, now we see that it was a bit illusory. But anyway, let's not read too much into But anyway, why is so
much riding on this? Why must there be a NATO victory? I think that's the gist of Billy Bob's question.
Well, I thought the question was, why is capitalist countries, or why are they not democracies?
Let's go with that interpretation.
Yeah, I mean, when a very extreme minority owns all of industry and monopolizes the state completely, there is no democracy to speak of. Liberalism is the idea that only owners of property have access to the freedom, democracy, and human rights. That is the actual reality that is hidden by all of the propaganda. I mean, it's simply is not possible when all the laws and regulations are written by the owners of industry, right? I mean, we can look at human society in a million different ways, and each way, affords some use. Like, we can look at human societies in terms of Black people, white people. Sure, that explains some. We can look at it in terms of people with freckles and without freckles. We can explain in terms of people who, I don't know, any number of thousands of different ways. But
gender, sexual orientation,
religion, all of these things. But the thing that yields the most, that has the most explanatory power, has been demonstrated repeatedly as to be the analysis of human society and affairs along the lines of ownership of profit-generating property, and those who do not own profit-generating property. This explains why things are the way they are, why human society is the way it is. I mean, we have seen Western intellectual production, thought production, incredibly prolific. I mean, post-war, the intelligentsia. We have psychology, sociology. We have linguistics. We have, all of them presumably with the underlying goal, intention of creating a better tomorrow. And all of these, the Western thought production intellectual production has completely failed to actually create a better tomorrow. I mean, 30 years ago, we said 32 people own half of the planet's wealth. And we said, oh my God, they can all fit on a bus, right? And today it's 6 people, right? We have not seen any of the wars lessen. We have not seen a peaceful world since the world become more peaceful, since the victory of liberal capitalism, right? In 1991, it was a resounding victory. We won. Freedom won the
End
world
of history.
against totalitarianism, against totalitarian communism, and the world is going to be so much better now. The world is, but have we seen? We have seen a series of devastating wars that destroyed the entire West Asia region. We have seen 5 million direct war deaths in the Congo alone from 1998 to 2006. We have seen inequality skyrocket, a hockey stick curve, just straight up. We have seen pollution. We have seen nothing done about the climate issue from the capitalist countries. We have seen racism get worse. We have seen police brutality in the USA get worse. We have seen prison populations rise. We have seen crime rates rise with the statistics from the prisons on every single level. Like, I would just like all of these bleeding hearts, compassionate, good liberals, right, which is the majority of people all around us, to honestly look at the world. Look, you won. The West won. You won against authoritarianism, whatever, 1991. What has transpired on this planet since? So democracy, what kind of democracy is it when open lobbying, determines our politicians from the major corporations? And it's only cosmetically better in Europe. In Germany, they hide the lobbying quite well. There's a lot of money in politics in Germany. And of course, Germany is a subservient local hegemon, subservient to the global hegemon. So,
good point. Anyway. Can I illustrate one of that? This sort of kabuki theater at the very top, saying the Republicans are bad, but the Dems are bad, but all of that crap. Is one headline that caught my eye. It's not in the cheat sheet because I thought less important, but Sanna Marin, the dancing queen of Finland. She was in there for a very short time with that dancing video. She abandoned neutrality, got the country into NATO. Then she fucked off out of politics and showed up in the British guy, Tony Blair's NGO or something. And this week she was in this big Paris fashion show with the Kardashians, the Beckhams, and a third name that I just didn't know and still don't know. But that illustrates it. She was never in there to lead her people, to help anybody. It was her private little membership into the club of the important and the rich, and that's all it was. And that's what you
reminds me of AOC a little bit here.
Jesus, exactly. She's the European AOC.
Please make me rich and famous. That's all I want in life. So Leo, I really appreciated your your words there, your commentary. I wanted to focus on the lack of democracy. So in this country, we say that, hey, our politicians are a result of a democratic process. People vote, and they end up voting for the politicians. So how is that not democracy? Well, here's how it's not democracy. So we have a 2-party system. These 2 parties collaborate together to keep any other party off the ballot. They're both funded by the same exact billionaires. So the same billionaires, the same big corporations that fund the Democrats also fund the Republicans. And money is what drives our electoral process. In addition, it also runs the actual, elections. So the actual elections themselves are run behind an opaque wall that, we're not allowed to actually see. So I don't know if I can say that on YouTube, but I'm not certain that, even the already rigged elections aren't rigged even further, behind the curtain at the ballot box area. But ultimately, they managed to, attract about 50% of eligible voters on average actually vote, and that's including for the big offices like president. So half the people that can vote don't even bother to vote. And what they do is they, it's like a Madison Avenue advertising campaign to get people to vote in their meaningless elections. And based on that 50% turnout, that's how they declare themselves legitimate. Like, no, we're a legitimate democracy because I fooled 50% of these people into thinking that they can make a difference and have a say. Well, they don't. They don't have a say because both A and B politicians already work for the capitalist class, like you described. And so, like, in what universe could that remotely be considered a democracy when politician A and politician B are both working for the billionaire class who have interests that are not the same interests as the vast working class majority?
I might be.
Low voter turnout is a direct. I mean, it simply means that people realize that their voice don't matter from experience. They simply know that deep down, whether they articulate it or not, they realize that. And in contrast, voter turnout in China is very, very high. I cannot remember the numbers, the figures, something like 80%, 86, 85%, something like that.
Citizens United. There's your answer right there. I mean, I can.
Well, that's the American.
All kinds of money in now, and they have all kinds of money. And with money, you can control these people.
Yeah.
And
zero accountability. I mean, obviously by law, Leo, I think, touched on this. There's no such thing as lobbying in Europe, but Ursula von der Leyen is under investigation for the better part of 2 years, maybe, for the way she got medicine. Let's say that. And she's never going to pay for that. She's never going to be on trial or anything. Just never going to happen.
And this brings us back to the central point. All governments are dictatorships. All of them. They have a monopoly on violence. All states, all governments are dictatorships. The people in charge set the policy and write the laws, and people follow. Right. The only question is if it's a dictatorship of the ownership class with their exorbitant inherited and wealth and power and influence, or if it's a dictatorship of a working class government with working class representing working class interests. Yeah. So everything is dictatorship. So this is the central question about politics that Westerners, having been deprived of dialectical materialism, of Marxism, is nearly impossible to understand.
No, that's another great point. And again, it's Madison Avenue, it's advertising, and it's propaganda that try and get people in this country to not see the obviousness of how this oligarchy runs things as a dictatorship. So
and we can see from concrete example with our own eyes, right? British Petroleum, BP, destroyed an entire ecosystem in the Gulf of Mexico some years ago. 2012 was it? I don't remember. I mean, this is devastation on a global scale. I mean, the entire Gulf of Mexico is fucked for the next 100 years. And all these animal rights activists, why don't they talk about all the marine animals, the turtles and the seals? And of course, the people that live on the coast of the Gulf of Mexico is a giant piece of land. The CEOs who cut down on safety regulation that caused this oil spill were fined something like 30,000 euros. 30,000 euros.
Chunk change.
Yeah, that's what they make in a week. Versus in China, a dictatorship of the proletariat, the dictatorship of the working class. If you cut safety regulations against the law, if you do crimes, embezzlement, hoarding of wealth, unfair business practices, you get punished by the state because the state is a working class state. We have seen too many hundreds of examples, too many to count.
The latest is the Evergrande CEO,
of
isn't
course.
it?
Yes. The big real estate, big tech recently also has been knocked down a notch or quite a few notches by the central government. they were becoming too big and creating a bubble, and so the government comes down and punishes these CEOs and owners of private businesses, and sentences them to prison, and or worse, and take their companies, just collectivize their companies just overnight. Now, sorry, you fucked up too many times. This company belongs to the people now, and it will be under brand new management. And then the capitalists, the rich who get their companies taken from there or fined proper amounts of money, go crying to Western media, and it's so oppressive. China took away my company. And Western media amplifies their voices. Oh, see, this is authoritarianism. This is dictatorship. Without the understanding that all governments are dictatorships, all governments are authoritarian. That word is meaningless. All governments are totally authoritarian. It's just a matter of who is being authoritarian against who.
Who is exercising authority? Is it the ruling class of billionaires, or is it a ruling class of a party of, by, and for the working class? So that's the question in any state. That's what defines a state. And the entire paradigm of authoritarianism versus dictatorship, or what's the other word they have? Autocracy. Autocracy versus democracy. It's a false paradigm. It's a Madison Avenue advertising campaign that is not grounded in reality. It's
meaningless.
It's put out specifically to confuse people and get them thinking in terms that have no relationship to objective reality.
Especially autocracy. It's just the opposite of reality. If Xi Jinping doesn't have some popular support from the party, he is finished within a week. If the party doesn't have broad mass support of the people, the party is finished.
Yeah. There's a wee trick they do, by the way. They've done it since the early days, since Stalin, basically. Stalin did that, not the Soviet Union. It's one guy. Right now, we are fighting against Putin, the one man, but they also say it about Xi Jinping. Now, the countries are not exactly the same. I would call socialist China 95 million people in the party, not exactly the same as an increasingly mixed economy, Russia, but they're the bad boys. So I just want to make a point that there's people in between the systems of China and the systems of, say, Washington, very, very different, the opposite ends of one spectrum.
Sure.
Just to bring up some latest news, Robert Fico just got elected in Slovakia, and his main running point was no more weapons to Ukraine. Fuck it, Slovakia first. Usually Czechoslovakia. Now, I have Orban. I mean, you can talk about mixed feelings. I have them. But we have been staunch on this, and it seems we have kind of an ally. But Orban comes from a first anti-communist, but earlier anti-liberal, right-wing Christian, that sort of traditionalist party. That's Fidesz. Fico comes from the Social Democrats, growing out of the old, and Mercuris makes this point, growing out of the old Communist Party is not the same as being the old Communist Party, not in the least. But last time these people were both elected, they had spats. We were anti-Slovak, they were anti-Hungarian, okay? There was always these optics of things. But right now, both of them are dictators. Both of them are Putin's men in Hungary. I saw in Germany, because you're in Berlin, not Severin Dagleben, but another really nice lady from Die Linke, one of these sane voices. She was labeled National Bolshevik, a Nazbo, for having a different opinion. So right now, when I see something like, the AfD, Alternative für Deutschland, is far right. Right now, that pretty much means not Atlanticist, not going along with the EU Atlanticist. So I'm wondering, within these cracks, within this enormous global system, there's various degrees. It's not really an absolute. Did that sort of wake any thoughts in you, Leo, or anyone?
Well, I'm sorry. I just wanted to back up and ask Leo another point, but I'll wait. Go ahead, answer that one, Leo.
Yeah, it's a spectrum, but we are also seeing our familiar political coordinates shift and mixing in the great confusion that is liberal democracy in massive scare quotes. It's just, I mean, when the fundamental social contract doesn't make sense, when the fundamental understanding of what we were just talking about is lacking, is not there. That opens up space for every kind of confusion, every kind of fantasy, every kind of delusion, and of course, when the left is totally destroyed, it is the nationalists who are against imperialism to a certain extent. When they get into power, they
We've seen that. We've
the
seen
right
that with
always, yes, the right always, gains popular support with a fiend anti-imperialism, and then their true colors show. Once they get into power, they're
Meloni.
either like Marine Le Pen. No,
Then Marine Le Pen or Meloni. Which one? Yeah, I mean, I always mix these
yeah,
two.
the Italian, yeah. Just like that. I mean, they're ultimately for imperialism, just of their nationality, of their nationalism. So yeah, so right now in the West, because the left has been defeated, has been destroyed over the last decades, starting from McCarthyism, which was launched by the cry of "Who lost China?" Um, the left is not taking up the anti-war, anti-imperialist positions. So the right is capitalizing on that right now, which is really, really sad.
Yeah, interestingly, Europe never had McCarthyism that the US did, and yet we are exactly at the same place. No real left to speak of. It's basically the EU bureaucracy on one hand, and these conservative, the right people, traditionally right, who say enough of this shit. Very weird, very weird. Carlo.
Well, one of the things I wanted to, I'm asking everybody really, is that when we had Cantham on, he gave us a kind of a rather intelligent delineation of the difference between Indian culture and Chinese culture, and why Chinese culture was progressing faster. And I'm so inured to living in right here in D.C. basically, that I just expect criminality uh, all the time, and don't see any way out of it. And I wonder if the difference between the way the kind of criminality Leo was talking about in China, this major white collar crime, as we would call it, is so much more in the under the scrutiny of people who can control it, and for the good of the people. If that is that a cultural difference, or is that a political difference?
Well,
I mean,
it's a little bit of both. It's a little bit of both. I mean, we have to. Culture is shaped by history. Is shaped by historical, economic, political arrangements, right? I mean, in India, the caste system persists and was exacerbated by the British colonialism. They
exactly the point Cantham made. Yeah, go ahead.
massively funded the Brahmins, the high upper caste, to control the country. They always use the elites, the right. They are right. They want absolute rule over all the poor people and exploit, enslave, and all the rest. So India has a different historical trajectory, which brings it to what it is today. And India was never unified. Even going back further in history, was never
That's what
unified.
shocks me. Yeah.
Yeah, like China was. I mean, in fact, that's one of the points that the colonizers used, right? Well, we unified India, yeah, but under what conditions, and also through while creating immense inequality within the country. So yeah, culture is shaped by these forces, right? So I mean, in China there was brutal feudalism as well under the monarchies. I mean, sexist, like incredibly oppressive. But the historical development of China, of statehood, of Confucianism, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and of course the situation that China was in the early 20th century, being colonized by Japan and the Eight Nations Alliance from the West. These particular situations made it possible, created an opening for communists to rise, for socialism, communism to rise and actually gain political power. And that is the major difference.
I mean, the century humiliation is similar to the Indian experience with England. But before that, even those horrific feudal times, as you mentioned, Confucianism and this sort of striving towards harmony. And that really is, no one can stand too tall above the others. That was always there. And it seems like China has returned to that, in a manner of speaking. By the way, Bashar al-Assad said the same thing in an interview when he was in China. He's been escorted home now. It's wonderful. But I wanted to say, of course, I haven't read it, 4,500 fucking pages, but China has produced a document for how the world should function in harmony, basically a blueprint for the next 50 years of how the UN should function, how nations should function together. And it's all about respect for each other, harmony. It's all about this Confucian way of seeing everything. And fuck the hegemon is kind of, it's not in there word for word, but it's in there, you know?
Yeah, the development of Chinese statehood, statecraft, for hundreds, many centuries, thousands of years, had reached already a point where the mandate of heaven, right? That was the
Jesus
justification
Holy.
for rule, and it developed to a certain point where the mandate of heaven became more or less, not completely, but basically a metaphor for popular approval.
Yeah.
When a monarch, when a king does a horrible job, and people are not happy, they say he's lost the mandate of heaven.
Yeah, by the way, the Chinese name, the Zhonghuo, which is China, that is the middle kingdom above the heaven and
central realm, I like to say.
Central realm is better. Yeah, you're the professional on this. I just read Paulie's comment and I hadn't heard about it, but that's.
But all of this, his history. Let's not go too much into traditionalism, right? People who don't understand Marxism, this history and this trajectory of Chinese political reality made it maybe a little bit easier, or maybe made it possible for Marxism to be established and to function with this understanding. But it doesn't replace, it is not the main factor. The cultural factor is not a main factor behind China's rise. All of these traditions definitely help. There's a solidarity between people. There's just on a day-to-day basis, people are much more comfortable with each other. People are much more direct and feel comfortable communicating with each other. And there's a fraternizing with like shop clerks at supermarkets. You go to a Chinese supermarket in China, you might do some small talk or like fraternize with the person who's ringing you out, which is like something that we were just discussing today. Like in Berlin, like that's a invisible, disavowed social rule that it's like you do not break that. If you break that, it's like really vulgar and people are just like, it's really kind of uncouth thing to do. But so like little things like that definitely help. No, but none of that replaces or should replace in our analysis of China's rise Marxist Leninism, which is
and I didn't mean to.
No, I didn't
mean to imply that it does, because I have to bring in my local color, obviously, because we had, if you're talking about tradition, to me, it's slightly different than culture, because culture is formed, shaped. It's different in 20 years, 30 years, depending on interactions, how the structure is and what your place is in it. But the traditions of Hungary in the 1930s, when we sent young boys to die in the Soviet Union, we were on the side of the Nazis, to make that clear. Our leaders were, at least. Was not that different from the 1950s when we rebuilt this country and had a red flag and we were building a bright future together. The culture was like from sunlight to black and white, very, very different.
That's
the way we approached
point.
Each other, the way we approached nature was drastically different. We weren't either the little slaves trying to make it and there was the lords at the top, but we finally had this fraternalism that unfortunately it doesn't seem we got back. There's morsels of it that can't be erased, that are still there in the psyche. But
yeah, those cultures and tradition, the cultural strains that I'm talking about in China, you're absolutely right, could have gone
I can imagine.
It could have. I mean, Confucianism and Chinese statecraft and all of these things that I was talking about could have easily, or not easily, but it could have absolutely gone in a fascistic nationalist, racist, ethnic cleansing, and all of that. And it was close. The Nationalist Party almost won. I mean, it was a close fight in the Civil War. I mean, it was the genius strategizing of Mao Zedong and his generals that won the war. But history could have gone the other way. It would be a fucking nightmare, and we would truly live in a world without hope.
So,
That's
Leo,
a very
you want to
insightful
credit.
remark. I just want to add one anecdote. Very insightful remark, because the one American poet that was so hot on Confucianism was Ezra Pound, and he foresaw it as a model, Confucianism as a model for modern Italy, for Mussolini's Italy.
Ah, yes.
And boom, right on the money. I'm sorry,
Wow.
Billy Bob. Go ahead.
Well, so Leo wants to give this ideology of Marxism, or more specifically Marxism-Leninism, some credit for China's unprecedented and impossible to overstate success. But that brings up a question in a lot of people's minds. Like, a lot of people have been indoctrinated to think of Marx as an evil grifter, and Lenin as even worse than an evil grifter and a mass murderer. So
let's not even talk about Stalin. Yeah.
Maybe we can just talk a very, how can we get people to conceive, in Marxism, Leninism in a different way. So for me, a lot of people probably think that Marxism, Leninism is simply, they hate private property. And what we're going to do is, as soon as we're going to take power, and we're going to nationalize everything. We're going to put the workers in charge of everything, and we're not going to have any owners, any private owners. And this will immediately, result in a better existence for everyone. So this is a dogma that says that the immediate abolition of private property will always and everywhere benefit people's lives. Is that Marxism?
That is stupid anarchism, but Leo, go.
Well, I would say the central tenet of that holds true. Of course, I mean, the ultimate problem, according to the scientific, rational understanding of human society, is ownership, is private ownership. I mean, the first light bulbs lasted 150 years and quickly squeezed out by companies that make light bulbs that last 5 years. And the same with our laptops. They should last a lifetime, endlessly upgradable, but they last 5 years. You have to buy a new laptop. That creates all the unnecessary, pointless production, wasteful production. That creates all of the pollution and all the problems, and by extension, man-made climate change. So the central issue, of course, is ownership, right? But we cannot dogmatically interpret that central tenet of Marxism, which is true, in every situation immediately. We have to adapt that understanding to this particular situation of a country, of a economy, right?
Yeah.
So, and
that is what China did. I mean, the secret, a friend of mine likes to say, the secret weapon of China's success is no private ownership of land.
Meaning that's way better than property, because I wanted to say a lot of people viewing might say they're coming from my toothbrush, my flat, my private, whatever, this ruler.
Well, no. I mean, this is a fundamental misunderstanding of Marxist terminology. Private property is the property that generates profit.
Yes. I mean, we have fewer factories in Europe right now, but the big office spaces, the big agencies will continue. I'm sorry.
Yeah, personal property is what you use for yourself, what you enjoy for yourself. If you own a yacht, or if you own a giant house, like if you only live in it yourself and you don't take rent for it, then that's personal property. So that's one of several related common misconceptions in the part of the world that has been deprived of Marxism.
So what's a better definition of Marxism or Marxism-Leninism? So for me, since it's not the immediate dogmatic abolition of, private ownership of the means of production. So the means of production are those things that are produced that society needs to exist. So society needs certain things, large accumulations of people in one geographic area. They require food, transportation, and all kinds of things. So these things are produced, and under capitalism, they're produced for profit. And that kind of limits what society is able to do, because if you just have the anarchy of short-term profit seeking, you're not going to be able to, to achieve certain things that you could otherwise achieve if you weren't constrained by this dogmatic approach of accumulating profit and just doing whatever gets the most profit. And that's where you put your investment. You invest in those things that are most profitable. So China doesn't really do that, right? China's not constrained by this short-term profit seeking, and they implement plans. They implement huge investment into things that aren't profitable, but that benefit society and go, coincide with a long-term plan to create sustainability and to increase quality of life, decrease poverty, etc. So my definition of Marxism is essentially, it's the effort to the sincere desire to look at the existing material conditions and identify what the best political and economic interests are of the working class, and to pursue those. But you pursue those given the current, existing material conditions. So in the case of China, the existing material conditions were an entire planet dominated by private capital, by imperialism. Like, if you have to exist in that kind of a planet, what do? Well, if they would have decided, hey, we're going to just privatize everything, or we're going to nationalize everything, there's going to be no private ownership. Guess what? Trillions and trillions and trillions in direct Western capital investment would have never happened. China would have never, industrialized at the speed that they did. And they would have probably been overthrown a long time ago by a U.S. color revolution, So it's you got to be smart about your application of Marxism, and it's not dogmatic. It's being smart. It's looking at the material conditions and identifying the best interest of the vast majority, and then pursuing that. And those are subjective things, but it's things that I believe, the CPC has done a ridiculously awesome job of doing thus far. And I think they're going to continue to. And I think, Xi, of course, is a great leader, and he's making some good decisions. But
China did do the total abolition of private property, and along much more orthodox Marxist lines, right? And even veered catastrophically, disastrously into a dogmatism, right? Which was the gain of four, which was a large part of the Cultural Revolution.
Yeah.
And these dogmatic interpretations of Marxism held China back. I mean, of course, it's impossible to say in hindsight, to guess alternate lines of history, but
the fact is there was a course correction. There wasn't in the Soviet Union. Big
so
difference.
Can I address that really quick? I mean, a little bit of pushback. Okay, Ben, go ahead.
No, I just wanted, again, I'm thinking, of someone watching who's not familiar with all the rhetoric and all the words we use. And let's say a libertarian, okay? And the instance would be, where's my freedom? And I just wanted to make a point that in the socialist country that I lived in, that's not communism. When Marx talks about you should labor for the love of labor, you'll be a fisherman in the morning or something, I'm convinced he's talking 1,000 years from now. First, it's the creation of abundance. 1945, Hungary, there was nothing. Food, buildings, housing, everything was in ruin. First, we had to make all that available to the people. But after that, we had private hairdressers. We had little stores, little boutiques. There has always been what is called in Marxist literature the petit bourgeoisie, or the small business owner. And they were, for the most part, uplifted. Exactly what I think Leo is going to get at, and maybe Billy Bob, with the Let the Thousand Flowers Bloom, and some people will be rich before the others, with Deng Xiaoping's opening up and reforms. And it was a legitimate path to take at that time. But, there's so much misconceptions about, you go to school, the communist state is a machine, and it chooses which cog you're going to be, and that's it, you're dead. That's the opposite. That's what you live in right fucking now. I wanted to make that point.
Yeah, we can approach that question from many different in many different ways. I mean, one way is the idea of freedom itself, right? In liberal democracies, freedom is about consumptive. Freedom is mainly consumptive, and it's about lifestyle choices, about individual consumption patterns. It's about you're free to act individually, right?
Oh, you're talking about the lowly plebs, yes. But at the highest point, it's about ownership. That's the freedom that
absolutely, absolutely. The free to oppress through ownership, to squeeze competition out through the power of your wealth and ownership, the wealth generated by your ownership. But fundamentally, in Marxism, there is a different understanding of freedom. That individual freedom, which we love, I'm I don't want to go too much into myself, but we love individual freedom. We are not against individual freedom. Marx was never against individual freedom, but we understand that true individual expression and true individual freedom is only possible in a equal society without the extreme inequalities that comes from private ownership of profit generating property. And also in a cohesive society where you have a lot of support, you have a lot of you have a network, you're part of a community that trusts each other, that helps each other, then you are free to express yourself, to be truly an individual. What kind of individual freedom do you have when you're isolated, alone, and competing against the other workers for a limited number of jobs, a large part of which is exported to poor countries? And so individual freedom from the Marxist sense comes from a material base first, a rational material arrangement of society. For example, in the entire former Soviet bloc, average cost of rent was 5% of wages.
Oh, absolutely. We traveled all the time.
Yeah, it traveled all the time. People were not stressed out about fucking survival. People were not stressed out about healthcare or jobs or trying to find a flat that you can afford, an apartment that you can afford. When that's actual fucking freedom.
Yes.
That's the basis on which your individual blue hair, whatever, like, tattoos, like noise music, whatever, all of that is built on top of that, can only be fully realized on top of such a equal or more rational organization of ownership and society without ownership of private property.
I'd like to point out, the libertarian idea of freedom kind of comes from the wealthy ownership class who owned property, and they wanted the freedom of not having government, tax them and tell them what to do. So it was kind of a freedom from a government, from democracy, really, from democracy, from the people being able to get the government to say, hey, why are there these extremely wealthy people, and what can we do about that? And these wealthy people are like, no, we want freedom. We want freedom from the threat of the people using the government to, to maybe make things a little bit more even and take away all my, my obscene disproportion of wealth, power, and privilege. I want the freedom to maintain this wealth, power, and privilege. I did want to attack Leo.
Go for it. I just wanted to say, but basis of what you were saying, it's radiated down. That's what the ideology of libertarianism is. It's from.
So who said Americans see themselves as temporarily embarrassed billionaires?
I don't know, but I love the quote.
The Koch brothers are a prime example of what you're describing, Billy Bob. Yeah.
Yeah, the bourgeois view of the world has been imposed on the working class for many centuries. People adopt the mannerisms, the customs, the attitudes, the worldview of the aristocracy and of the bourgeoisie. Anyway,
people order fucking limited Lego sets. You know what? For investment, looking at how the price will behave in 5 years, 10 years. That's how poison.
Yeah.
You wanted to attack Leo. I have things to say, but I want to hear that.
No, no. So I'm kind of joking, but Leo kind of articulated a popular, I believe, maybe misconception about the years of Mao in China, where he maybe dogmatically pursued this dogmatic agenda of the abolition of private property. And I wanted to point out.
No. The Gang of Four. culture.
Go on, finish.
No, yes. So he did say the Gang of Four. That's true. But I would say that Mao, definitely knew, and I was probably misrepresenting. I just misrepresented Leo. So sorry about that, Leo. But I think Mao understood Marxism how I understood and how I articulated it. So it's looking at the material conditions, and it's deciding what is the interests of the vast majority and how do we pursue those interests. So unfortunately, Mao was stuck with a set of material conditions that were very bad. So he was under an embargo by the West. He had, the Sino-Soviet split because Khrushchev threw Stalin under the bus. That led to the Sino-Soviet split. And then you had an isolated China. So in that isolation, Mao was stuck with very bad options. And so he chose a policy of self-sufficiency. It's, hey, we're going to raise ourselves up by our bootstraps. We're going to do it collectively. We're going to do it together. That wasn't the best option of all the options, but it was the best options given his, material conditions he was facing. So here's another option that Mao talked about. I think this quote is from 1945. But it sounds like something that Deng wanted to do. But of course, Deng was able to do it later because the material conditions changed. So here's what Mao said. He said, some people refuse to understand why the Chinese communists do not fear capitalism, but on the contrary, develop it as much as possible. Our answer is simple. We have to replace foreign imperialist and native feudalist oppression with capitalist development because that is the inevitable course of our economy and because both the capitalist class and the proletariat benefit. What is superfluous is not native capitalism, but foreign imperialism and native feudalism. On the contrary, our capitalism is indeed too little to develop industry. Enormous capital is required. Where will it come from? It can only come from two sources: the capital accumulated by the Chinese people themselves and from foreign loans. And the highlighted part, we must welcome all foreign investment as long as they obey the laws of China and are advantageous to our economy. So that was in 45, before the Western embargo, before the Soviet split. And he was like, yeah, we need this opening up. We need to trade. We need to get investment. This is what we need. It's going to work. And so some people think that Mao opposed that, but Mao wanted that, but he was constrained by the material conditions that later forced China into a policy of self-sufficiency, there was 136 ambassadorial level meetings between China and the United States starting in 1955 going to 1970. 136 meetings. China was always raising the issue of, hey, let's get rid of this embargo. So they were lobbying the West repeatedly for 16 years to end the embargo. And finally, in 1971, the embargo was ended. And so China's lobbying bore fruit. And the U.S. did that, of course, because of the Sino-Soviet split and because they thought it was prudent to try and, get China on their side against the Soviet Union. But once the material conditions changed, once the Western embargo ended, then of course China immediately started pursuing this opening up of trade and allowing capital investment in a non-dogmatic way. Now you're right, Leo. The Gang of Four were absolutely opposed to that. They were dogmatic leftoids, like we see Western Marxists, and that don't like China because China sold out to capitalism. They just demonstrate they don't know what Marxism is. That's all they're doing. Anyway, that's a rant. I mean, I've been
by the way,
I don't feel personally attacked so much.
That's good. But lately on Twitter, just so you know, these Western Maoists has also been calling China the worst fascist state next to Russia. That's what they're calling it now.
Yeah, there's a thing that is related to what Billy just said. There's the Western deviation of leftism. The Western development of leftism since forever, especially in the post-war years, has deviated from this focus on ownership and class, and people start to hate money, right? They there's a major difference between Western communists and global South communists. Western leftists hate money. They think money is the problem. They think rich people is the problem, not owners, but all rich people. If you worked for a living, you got lucky, you got rich, well, you're the problem, right? And money is the problem. While global South communists, we love money.
Oh,
like we love development. We love having good things like being able to afford food. Like money is not evil in itself in this historical era of development. I mean,
Not just this one. The Soviet Union had markets. Let's not say. I mean, Carlo someone talked about. Maybe you talked about absolute equality, and a miner didn't get the same pay as a janitorial service, and it was all this extreme focus on equality came from the Frankfurt School of lefties. Really wasn't the original plan. When a country is under development, I mean, you can explain the 5 stars of the Chinese flag, which you have on your chest. It was never about everybody's equal tomorrow. You get the same house, the same size, the same fucking utilities is ridiculous. I don't know where that comes from, but even in the 1930s Soviet Union, that was not what it meant. Go ahead.
Marx himself said very, very clear. I think it was the Gotha program. I don't remember which tract it was, but he said we are not interested in equality at all beyond the abolition of private ownership of profit-generating property.
What they call the means of production, exactly.
Yeah. Marx himself said that very, very clearly. We don't want absolute equality, everyone dressing the same or having the same salary. We do not want that. We're not interested in that at all. We just want to take away the unequal competition, the unfair competition that people who inherit 12 hotels have over you.
Yeah.
That's all. That's all we want to take away is that unfair advantage. People who inherit and people who own profit-generating property. Anybody understands that it's the way to get rich. The only way to get rich in capitalism is buy some property that generates profits. By working yourself with your own hands, you're not going to get rich. You can work hard all your life. You can work,
Wait, you're saying I'm not a temporarily embarrassed billionaire?
Wait, sorry?
You're saying I'm not really a temporarily embarrassed billionaire?
Sorry to break it to you.
I think if I just keep a couple more years, I'm gonna achieve that billionaire status. Yeah, no.
Yeah,
you have to bear in mind that getting rich is a process, and during that process, you commit horrible sins, terrible sins
through property,
and there's no exception. There is I cannot think of one exception
under a capitalist state. Capitalism,
it's
China has demonstrated that an entire nation can become rich without firing a single shot, without sanctioning anybody, without bombing anybody, without enslaving anybody, without exploiting, without committing crimes. China has demonstrated that an entire nation can develop and can become super wealthy and powerful without colonizing anyone. And China has demonstrated that individuals can also get rich through hard work.
Yeah. You can get to the level of ultimate comfort in life. You mentioned yachts or something. You're still not going to own the decision-making power of 50 million people or something like that, or own their labor. You're not going to do that. But you can get a really comfortable lifestyle. That's very different from getting in Carlo's system, the Washington system, to a point where the Nancy Pelosi's are, where these people are, very different. I want to make a further point because, go on, Carlo, if you want.
I just briefly wanted to, maybe not really briefly, but I just wanted to point out Russia. Here, like I read this morning, once again, what Leo was saying, the profit element in the arms industry. They're not going to make more weapons here unless they get the money and plenty of money so they can steal it. Here you have Russia that has a tenth of the military budget that the United States has.
Almost exactly.
And it's outproducing not only the United States, but all of this NATO slime that's out there.
Really good point.
And then it's not really it's experienced communism, and there is residual elements of communist principles there, but it's not communism any longer. And I think we should maybe analyze that a little bit. Not right now, but sometime.
No, I think that's a wonderful point. We'll get back to if we lose this, you could get back to the previous point. But the 155 millimeter ammunition, that they use, the shelling that is winning this war. That's not really profitable from the point of a Western MIC company. They want the shiny, I don't know how many billion F-35 fighters that can't really perform.
Yeah,
They want
the big money isn't in ammunition. I mean,
It's
there's
in
profit to be made
flashy-
in ammunition, but
Yeah.
big, huge weapon systems that don't
flashy
work.
R&D, lots and lots of billions. That's what they want, and that's why a national defense industry is just far superior. Based on the old Soviet model, we make it work, we go in there and we bust the enemy's ass, as opposed to let's sort of manipulate the worldwide defense market to get buyers, which is a lot of. I mean, not all of the wars had different aims, but these people got so thick on the previous conflicts that they have a considerable degree of power. Small side point, they just had this massive, I think there's 30 countries, but about 200 companies met in Kiev for this defense industries expo summit or whatever. And they really think they're going to build all this stuff within the next 2 or 3 years in Kiev, which I found fascinating. But you're right on the other point, 10 times as much. That's the US budget for war. That's almost precisely.
I want to make a further point. I mean, that kind of illustrates what I said earlier, where, socialism isn't constrained by the profit motive. So the Western military industrial complex is definitely constrained by the profit motive. They have to make a profit. And if they don't make a profit, they're not going to do it. They're not principled. They're not patriotic. They don't really, they just look at their own narrow interests of making profit, and that's it. And that's an inferior way of approaching things, and it's not going to be good to win a war, as we're seeing. But I wanted to make the point that in capitalism, the competition ends up having winners and losers. It tends towards a monopoly. So as the competition goes, takes place over the decades, you start to see big companies accumulate a lot of wealth, and then that makes them even more powerful. And then they have even more advantage over the upstarts. And so this just tends to, and so we talked about, I don't know how long ago it was 38 people account for the same amount of wealth as half the planet. Today it's like 5 or 6. But what do these people do? It's the natural outcome of market competition. And what do these people do with their winnings, with their loot? They start buying governments. They start buying media propaganda apparatuses. They buy surveillance apparatuses. They buy politicians. They buy generals. And they just get everything to serve their own interests.
And why wouldn't they? According to the rules.
So what can we do about that? Well, that's what communism offers. That's what socialism is. That's what Marxism is. It's saying, hey, you put in place a government that is dedicated to serving the interests of the vast majority. And that's what communism and Marxism is predicated upon. And they see the world through the reality of oppositional class interests, where, those who own the means of production are going to end up having, political and economic interests different from the vast majority. And how do you manage that contradiction? Well, you need a communist party in power. And so China, thank God for China, they're just showing the superiority of Marxism and socialism. And that obviousness is going to get more pronounced as the decades come. And so thank God for China. I heard Scott Ritter say that. He's the farthest thing from a Marxist. I'm seeing conservatives, I'm seeing Republicans, I'm seeing Trump supporters espousing these communist talking points about our government is only in it for the rich. It's an oligarchy. Well, yeah, welcome to reality. But it's good that they're.
Yeah, that's where Jimmy Dore began. Just remember, the Steph Zamorano, I love and respect Jimmy, is her handle is the miserable liberal. That's where she began, but they went on this huge learning journey, and obviously they found a lot of really hard truths in there, and it's fantastic. As opposed to, I wanted to make this point about the Chinese flag on your sweatshirt, Leo, that when you get an impoverished country, 100 years of humiliation, basically no hard industry, a very, very backwards place. The 5 stars there represent obviously the party, the guiding principle, and the 4 little stars are important because that's not just the workers and the peasants, but the petit bourgeoisie, the small sort of business, and the national bourgeoisie, the big business owners, managed by the state to go inside in the direction of harmony. So it's not what I found pervert, you've probably seen this, if not, something that upset me over this weekend was Bernie Sanders came in front of the camera from obscurity to ask for more aid from the fucking Congress for Ukraine, the so-called lefty. This is social democracy. You can say tax the rich, pay the rich, get the money out of politics. This fundamental stupidity of we can just tax these people who have power, massive power, and we're going to tweak the machine to create equality is not the same as taking control of the machine to ensure everybody's well-being. That to me has always been such a treacherous part, the Sotsdem viewpoint.
Yeah, that's the Sotsdem deviation of a perversion of Marxist ideas.
And all the European social democratic parties are saying war. They are all aboard Ukraine right now.
Yeah, imperialism,
except for Fico,
the primary is even a deeper contradiction than I would say capitalism. I mean, this is class, on an international level, on a continental level.
Yeah.
Like the ownership, like the global North owns diamond businesses in the Congo and owns Canada. We forgot to talk about Canada so far. Canada owns like 98% of the mines in Africa.
And one mine about 20 kilometers from me in Hungary. That's a current Canadian mining concern for uranium, for some reason.
I didn't know that. But I was going to tie this back to Chrystia Freeland's, talk. Like, so when she talks about democracy versus autocracy, given our last hour of discourse, like, I hope people can understand and see it for the nonsense that it is. It's just self-serving nonsense. These are puppets of the billionaire class, and they don't have people's interests at heart.
The billionaire class makes the mistake seeing us, the lowly plebs, as monolithic as the same. We all know we're not, and let's not make the mistake of saying that they are the class that just monolithic and they have one guiding principle, one shining star. As you can see, there's cracks. I watched, and I have to get off X, formerly Twitter, because Elon Musk just put up something like an Zelensky with that, the vegan meme where, I've spent half an hour not talking about what I eat, and it was Zelensky, and I spent half an hour not begging for money, and everybody in the world began hating him. There are cracks. There are different, even in the international level class, as you can see with the examples of Hungary and Slovakia, who see the fucking writing on the wall and say, we want a future. We'd rather go east than this bullshit that's pretty much impoverishing everybody to the west of us. There's these cracks within Europe, within US. I mean, half of the US, was it the Senate? I get mixed up on the ruling. They said, yeah, we're going to have this. The government can work for 45 days, but no aid to Ukraine. So there's a force there that wants to go that way. Obviously, they want to destroy China, but the cracks. And I love that Leo said this, that there was this big infighting in China between Mao Zedong, who retreated to the mountains, and the Kuomintang down in Taiwan, and that's where basically the working classes crept in to find their voice and actually create a worker state. And that's, I think, what most people around the world have to look out for. It really is what these cracks between different factions of the ruling class should be paid attention.
It can be exploited to, more efficiently weaken the imperialist system and really bring socialism as the dominant planetary ideology. Because right now, capitalism still, of course, maintains a preponderance of, the economy, military, political power. So they're still very strong, but there's an inevitability there of the West's decline. And so I think that's great. Man, I really did grandstand a lot. Like a lot of these things I haven't really discussed. I argue with them on Facebook a lot. I'm always arguing these issues, but I've kind of not really brought them into our podcast very much.
Should we say a little bit about the recent fiasco, the largest blunder, catastrophe in PR?
It's got bigger than I ever imagined. Take it away, Leo. I mean, I have some details, but go ahead.
It's complicated, Leo. Nazis are complicated.
Yeah.
That was the Ukrainska Pravda, the Ukrainian Truth magazine, who had this op-ed about Yaroslav Humka saying his past is complicated. That was cool.
Yeah, so we're seeing the reality come out. Of course, these little bits and pieces is just the tip of the iceberg. The tiny little pieces that cannot be hidden anymore. But of course, I mean, from this one little thing, if you dig into the Nazi past of Canada admitting thousands of Ukrainian Nazis, and the Galician division was famous for being one of, if not the most brutal of all the Waffen SS divisions during World War II. And why were they allowed into Canada? Why were they not persecuted like the German Nazis? Because Ukraine was on the border of the Soviet Union, and it is geostrategically useful for empire, for the anti-communist empire that already set their sights on the Soviet Union before the war even ended. That recent film Oppenheimer, which is forgettable, whatever, but it did make that one point that the United States had already set their sights on the Soviet Union before World War II even ended, when they were still allies. But anyway, so Ukrainian Nazis were not persecuted because Ukraine is useful geostrategically in the project to destroy communism in the Soviet Union. All of the most, let's say, vast majority of the Ukrainian Nazis who mass murdered Jews and Poles and Gypsies and Roma and communists, of course.
Just regular communists, yeah. By far the most persecuted minority during the Holocaust were just communists.
Absolutely. They first came for the communists, right? Let's not forget. They didn't first come for the gays or first come for the Jews. They first came for the communists. But anyway, so Canada, as a colonial project, as an English colonial project, is the reality of this has been already starting to, edge into popular consciousness in the recent years with the revelation of the mass graves in the native schools in which they took native children, First Nation children away from their families, and ethnic cleansing is literally continuing genocide in modern times, or past the original genocide that was committed to establish these colonies in the first place. So Canada's we cross-reference that with the heinous racism that exists in Canada, wanton violence against native First Nation peoples. Thousands of First Nation children and women disappear every year without very much investigation, raped, murdered, trafficked. If any viewers want to dig into this, it is horrific. I mean, the level of casual, violent racism in Canada against First Nation peoples. So if we cross-reference what happened last week in Canadian Parliament, standing ovation for a Waffen SS member, with all of these realities in Canada, right? With Justin Trudeau's blackface video or photograph,
Chrystia Freeland's grandfather.
Freeland's grandfather, who was literally a Nazi, and her father edited. Was it her father that edited the Nazi journal? But anyway. So if we combine
Stepan Bandera's grandson, so-called Steve Bandera, also lives in Canada doing his little propaganda, basically whitewashing the ideology. So I wanted to interject, if I may, just a quick point that if you watch Canadian media or just interviews with Trudeau, you get the impression that they're holier, they're more liberal than thou. They really are. We don't see color. They have Jagmeet Singh in Parliament, who is, I think, a Sikh, brown skinned person, and in every cop show they have someone with that sort of turban on them, and we are absolutely the most liberal, human rights loving people on the face of the earth. And contrast that with this reality, Leo.
Yeah, there's an amazing podcast actually about the horrific reality of racism in Canada, the violent crimes. I forget what it's called. You can maybe do a Google search for Canada podcast racism violence.
I
But
think
anyway, the
Go ahead.
entire the bigger picture, that colonialism, the genocidal colonialism that committed genocides on every corner of the earth, that killed 100 million Australian Aboriginals, blah blah blah. I'm not going to list all of the colonial crimes. It is a straight line from colonialism to capitalism to liberalism, which is the cosmetic faceover, and to fascism. Fascism is funded always the right. The reaction against social progress is always funded by the liberals, by the capitalists, by capitalism. It is a continuous straight line with no rupture at all throughout history. It is the same 500 years colonial, fascist, capitalist, liberal empire that rules the West today. And the forces fighting against them are the same forces of liberation as always. I mean, this is it is so, okay, I'm going to be sarcastic here. This is a fact that is so counterintuitive and so illogical and unimaginable that the majority of Western citizens cannot accept it, which is that the same colonial empires of yesterday are the neo-colonizers of today. And they have not switched sides.
Stalin said, objectively, liberalism is the moderate wing of fascism. And, Stalin, of course, tried for years to get a defensive alliance with Britain, with France, with the liberals, the capitalists that ruled in Western Europe, because he saw what was going on with the creation of the fascist state of Nazi Germany. And, ultimately, he, it was the whole idea of the West was to create Nazi Germany and use them as a weapon to destroy the workers' society in the Soviet Union. And so
also German communism.
Let me amplify that point, because based on our interactions with Carlo, I went on a little research, I call it an expedition into what the social media alt-right, what happened with it since Gamergate and all that. And I discovered these people, very, very tiny followings, not organized at all, really irrelevant. But what they've become is little grifters who say, well, I translated the works of Gustav Kossinna, basically the Germanic people, and basically what the Nazis used to say, we're superior to the Indo-Europeans and all that. I translate these little books. But the thing I found in as a constant among them, they all agree that collectivism came from the word collectivism, never used by any communist, came from Nazi Germany. And they all agree that Nazi Germany was a reaction to the Soviet experiment. Not any Western historian never will ever say that, but said, yep, we have to react to this. And that's what unifying Europe against it was. They all fucking agree blatantly. And I thought that was interesting enough to share. I'm not going to name names because they don't deserve any fucking traffic, but it was interesting.
Carlo, given all of this, are you now ready to accept Stalin as your Lord and Savior?
That was
a religious intervention, Carlo.
I would, but I'm pretty certain he wouldn't want me.
That was 10 out of 10.
No, we want everyone. We need everyone. We want everyone. I mean, okay, Stalin was such a dictator that he tried to resign 4 times, and each time his letter of resignation was vetoed by the Central Committee. He was such a dictator that he did not have the power to quit his job. But anyway, I don't want to go off on Stalin. The West, the colonial anti-communist empires have always funded the right. We need to understand the Nazis as the attack dogs of Britain and the United States. We need to, anybody wants to research on this topic, Hitler had a life-size portrait of Henry Ford. In his office. Standard Oil, the petroleum corporation from United States of America, provided 70% of the energy for the Nazi war machine in the first years before they went out of control and began attacking their masters. And also the Japanese war machine was fueled by U.S. American Petroleum Corporation. This is the same pattern as everywhere. In Tibet, when socialism was liberating Tibet, the United States, the CIA funded the reaction. They funded the Lama,
Dalai Lama, yeah.
the
Fucking
slavers,
skinning slaves who didn't pay their debt. Yeah.
the feudal lords. They funded the reaction. They funded the reaction in Afghanistan to destroy Afghan socialism. They funded Iranian reactionary fundamentalists to destroy Iranian. That's a little bit more complicated, but anyway, everywhere it is exactly the same.
Saudi Arabia, Central America with the drug cartels. Same
Absolutely.
thing.
And if we look at Germany, I mean, it's really sad that I live in Germany, and I Germans should be proud of Germany. They should be, because Germany was the most leftist, was the most tolerant, was the most LGBT friendly, was the most feminist, most socially progressive, and the most communist country of all Europe in early 1900s.
Thank you, Honecker, by the way. Oh, no, early 1900s. Then
early 1900s. I mean, it was already very progressive. It was, Berlin was a town of like fun and parties. It was a capital of culture. But anyway,
something for people to research is the burning down of the Reichstag, which was also blamed on these fucking commie leftists. That was
sure. That's yeah. But anyway, my bigger point is that Germany was the place in Europe where communism was the strongest, and next was Italy and Spain. Communism in Italy was very strong. Communism in Spain was very strong.
The strongest reaction came from those three places.
And these are the three places where the bourgeois powers, with their exorbitant powers, had to make sure that fascism rise in order to defeat the communist.
And Hitler couldn't win a vote. Hitler couldn't win a vote. He was appointed by Hindenburg. He never won an election. And he was appointed by Hindenburg. So there was a clear.
To talk with the big industrialists of Germany, the big, what we would call billionaires today, the 5 or 10 of them, we say we rubber stamped it. It's okay, here's the money for your campaign for your.
No, they saw socialism. It was a specter. They were haunted by that specter. And history is the story of how they responded to it. And we're still, that history is still playing out today. And it's looking good. It's looking good. I like how things are going.
For the most part, I mean, both the US and Russia are going to have these nuclear shelter practices later this week. I think tomorrow is the US. You might get a text from Joe Biden, so be prepared for that.
Yeah.
So other than that, it's looking good.
I have to go. Sorry. I have a meeting.
Thank you, Leo, for your
Thanks for coming.
Yes,
lovely talking to you guys. I love you guys.
Okay, thanks.
Love you back.
Thanks.
Communism will win.
We will.
So, Carlo, we don't mean to, we don't mean to have an intervention here with you.
No, that's all right.
But this is a good discussion. I really enjoyed this program. We've been going for an hour and a half. Any concluding thoughts, or do we want to hit another topic? Because we can hit another topic.
I was thinking what's important enough. By the way, do you guys know anything about New York? I know there was the emergency, the big flooding. I just wanted to
right.
Nothing to do with foreign policy, but it is
something on a personal note, I was supposed to go up to the annual meeting of this group I'm involved with, a group of poets, and they're in Connecticut. And Rosie and I booked a train 2 years ago, and it was flooded then. The subway and the train.
I saw some videos.
Train terminals flooded then, so we couldn't get to Connecticut. I think it's global. It's simply a condition of global climate change. I can't think of any other.
Oh, yeah, I'm just thinking about the status of where things at,
Oh, I don't really know.
Cool.
Yeah, no, the interconnectedness of everything is a great, principle within Marxism. And, nothing ought to be seen in a vacuum, in a silo, separated from everything else. It's all connected. So, yeah, the climate, imperialism, capitalism, social. I mean, these things are connected.
Yeah. Well, on that note, I've been watching. I watch a lot of videos, and I've been watching what the Chinese have been doing, not only in China but in the Middle East, and planting trees and creating arable land out of deserts, and and just essentially going green on a monumental scale. And it's impressive, very impressive.
They call
I
it
don't think the West could pull it off.
Yeah, they call it ecological civilization, and I think it's very different. I mean, that's a whole other topic, but from the green mania that's in Europe, where you're supposed to eat bugs in 5 years, that is real. It actually is. In some kindergartens, you get your little crispy critters. Very different from China's ecological civilization, because they have been leading the charge on this. Just on EVs, they've outshone anybody. They're the greatest car exporters this year, which means Japan is dethroned. But yeah. Big topics we always get into it in the end.
At the end. Well, I for one am exhausted, sort of. Tell you the truth.
All righty. Well, I think it was a great discussion with Leo too. So, Billy Bob.
Yeah, we'll be back on Thursday, same time. We got off to a little bit of a late start. That happens sometimes. But yeah, so thank you everyone. Thank you Ben. Thank you Carlo for putting up with us. You're a great sport.
Yeah. Thank you, Todd Doherty and Paulie.
You guys put up with me. It's the other way around, I think.
All right. That's an hour and a half. See you guys.
All right. Bye-bye.